coups becoming alarmingly common across the African continent. Are these uprisings genuinely the voice of oppressed citizens rising against corruption and failed governance? Or have they increasingly become power tussles where frustrated soldiers fight not for democracy or reform, but for their own authority? And perhaps most uncertainly, has the wave of coups turned into a continental trend, a domino effect, where one country's collapse inspires another's attempt? As another attempted coup shakes the West African nation of Benin, these questions take on new urgency. The region, once celebrated as a stronghold of democratic growth, now finds itself wrestling with recurring power grabs, rising discontent, and the dangerous normalization of military takeovers. Welcome to the Flash News. Let's begin today with Thailand-Cambodia clashes and head to Benin, where an attempted coup has been foiled, but the implications for the region far from over. Stay with us. Tensions along Thailand-Cambodia border exploded once more this weekend as Thailand launched airstrikes deep into Cambodian territory following fresh ground clashes in disputed zones. The renewed fighting marks a devastating reversal for a peace plan brokered just 2 months prior by the United States President Donald Trump, a deal that was celebrated as a major diplomatic achievement at the time. Well, let's take a quick throwback, a quick look at this video of Donald Trump celebrating the peace deal between Thailand and Cambodia as a great achievement.
Well, this is so exciting because we did something that a lot of people said couldn't be done, and we saved maybe millions of lives on this one peace deal itself. And I'll tell you what makes me so happy is the two countries we're dealing with, and the third that helped so much. I appreciate so much. Maybe it couldn't have been done without you.
According to both governments, artillery fire and cross-border attacks escalated rapidly, forcing Thailand to deploy air power in what it described as a retaliatory measure. Cambodia accused Thailand of violating the ceasefire framework, while Thai officials insisted they were defending their military post from Cambodian aggression. Villages near the border reported explosions, smoke columns, and civilian panic as the conflict flared with a force that observers say undermines any claim that the peace agreement had achieved stability. But beyond the immediate violence lies a deeper question about the peace deal itself and the broader pattern of the United States mediation under President Trump. If a peace framework collapses barely 2 months after being signed, How effective was it in the first place? Was this agreement truly designed to resolve the decades-long dispute between Thailand and Cambodia? Or was it yet another addition to Trump's long list of peace deals touted as diplomatic victories regardless of their durability on the ground? For analysts, the rapid breakdown raises doubts about whether the United States facilitated agreements are built on substantive compromises or merely symbolic gestures crafted for the headlines. The Thailand-Cambodia situation exposes a troubling possibility. Peace deals may be announced with impressive ceremony, but without mechanisms strong enough to enforce compliance, build trust, or manage long-standing grievances, they risk becoming temporary pauses rather than lasting solutions. And this leads to bigger questions, not just for Southeast Asia, but for Trump's foreign policy legacy as a whole. If a peace plan collapses within weeks, months, what does that suggest about the future of other agreements that he has helped brokered across different regions? How many of those deals are genuinely structured for long-term conflict resolution? And how many may have been rushed for political optics or international scorekeeping? But as the border heats up again and families in frontier communities brace for displacement, the failure of this peace agreement becomes more than a diplomatic embarrassment. It becomes a lived tragedy for civilians who had hoped the deal would finally give them relief. Instead, they now find themselves caught once again in the uncertainty of a dispute that international mediators have repeatedly struggled to resolve. Today, the world watches to see whether Washington will attempt to revive or reinforce the agreement, and whether Thailand and Cambodia can be guided back from the brink of a full-scale conflict. But for many, the pressing question remains: in an era where peace deals can be announced quickly and collapse even faster, what is the real value of diplomacy if its promises cannot survive the test of time? Well away from Cambodia and Thailand, and over to Benin. Benin awoke to a wave of uncertainty on 7th December after a group of soldiers stormed the national broadcaster, announced they had taken control of the country, and declared the dissolution of President Patrice Talon's government. Let's take a listen to that.
Les Béninois, chers compatriotes, en ce jour, dimanche 7 décembre 2025, nous, forces de défense et de sécurité, après une réflexion bien mûrie et pour donner un repère à notre pays, avons décidé de prendre nos responsabilités suite aux multiples dérives du gouvernement de M. Patrice Talon. Il s'agit de, sur le plan sécuritaire, la dégradation continue de la situation sécuritaire au nord du Bénin, l'ignorance et la négligence de la situation de nos frères d'armes tombés au front et surtout celle de leurs familles abandonnées à leur triste sort par la politique de M. Patrice Talon, malgré les multiples promesses relayées en grande pompe sur les médias. Le comité militaire pour la refondation CMR a décidé 1. La constitution du novembre 2025 est suspendue. Toutes les institutions sont dissoutes. Les activités des partis politiques suspendues jusqu'à nouvel ordre. Les frontières terrestres, maritimes, aériennes du Bénin sont fermées jusqu'à nouvel ordre. La prise du pouvoir en ce moment traduit la ferme volonté du comité militaire de la refondation à mettre fin à l'exclusion de toutes les couches sociales de notre pays sans distinction aucune dans la suite de la transition et de restaurer la cohésion nationale. À la communauté internationale, le comité militaire de la refondation rassure que les engagements internationaux du Bénin ainsi que les droits humains seront respectés. Enfin, l'armée s'engage solennellement à donner au peuple béninois l'espoir d'une aube véritablement nouvelle où il règne la fraternité, la justice et le travail, symbole de notre unité nationale. Vive l'armée, vive la refondation de notre chère patrie, vive le Bénin, la République ou la mort, le peuple d'abord.
The mutineers, calling themselves the Military Committee for Refundation, claimed they were seizing power to restore order. By mid-morning, the nation appeared on the brink of joining the growing list of African states shaken by military takeovers in recent years. But by the afternoon, the attempted coup had already collapsed. Interior Minister Alassane Seydou announced that loyalist forces had regained control of the broadcaster and key strategic points. Courtesy of BF1 TV, we have this autodot clip of Alassane speaking.
In the early morning of Sunday, December 7, 2025, a small group of soldiers began a mutiny with the aim of destabilizing the state and its institutions. Faced with this situation, the Beninese armed forces and their hierarchy, faithful to their oath, remained Republican. Their revolt allowed them to maintain control of the situation and for the maneuver. Also, does the government invite the population to go about their business as normal?
The President Talon, also later addressed the nation, assuring citizens that the situation is completely under control. Courtesy of Benin TV, we'll take a listen to this.
I would like to salute the sense of duty of our army and its leaders who remained Republican and loyal to our homeland. With them, we stood firm, regained positions, and cleaned up the last pockets of resistance from the mutineers.
Sources confirm that the swift response was made possible not only by loyal units within the army, but also by rapid support from Nigerian forces who moved to back Benin's constitutional government and prevent the mutiny from spreading. Yet even with orders restored, the events in Benin raised deeper, troubling questions that have become painfully familiar across the continent. Why are coups returning with such frequency? Are these military uprisings genuine expressions of national frustration against corrupt or underperforming governments? Or have they morphed into internal power struggles disguised as patriotic missions? And most critically, has West Africa, once praised for its democratic progress, become vulnerable to a dangerous trend where one attempted coup inspires another? While the Benin incident fits into a pattern unfolding across Africa. In the past few years alone, governments in Mali, Burkina Faso, Guinea, Sudan, Niger, and Gabon have been overthrown or shaken by military interventions. In several cases, soldiers stepped forward claiming to rescue their nation from mismanagement, but the absence of mass protests, the lack of public mobilization, and the speed with which military units act have led many analysts to argue that modern coups in Africa are no longer about national liberation, but about battles for power within state institutions. Benin's attempt overthrow reflects this evolution. The attempted overthrow of the nation of Benin reflects this evolution. There was no nationwide uprising calling for the government's fall, no civic movement pushing for regime change. Citizens were not marching in the streets. Instead, the coup unfolded in a television studio, driven by a faction within the armed forces rather than the will of the population. And this mirrors a wider trend where the military exploits political tensions, economic challenges, contested elections, security fears to justify stepping into power, only to repeat the same cycles of centralized rule and delayed transitions. The involvement of Nigeria in suppressing the uprising further underscores how seriously the region now views the threat of coup contagion. West African governments understand that instability spreads quickly if Benin, long considered one of the region's more stable democracies, can face an attempted takeover. No country seems to be immune. For ECOWAS already, weakened by repeated coups in member states, preserving Benin's democratic order became both symbolic and strategic. Although the mutiny has failed and arrests have been made, the attempted coup has left lingering unease. It signals not only the fragility of Benin's political institutions, but also the shifting landscape of West African politics, where democratic systems are increasingly challenged by militaries testing the boundaries of power. In the aftermath, citizens of Benin, like millions across the continent, are left wondering whether this was just another isolated act of rebellion or a warning shot that democracy in West Africa remains under siege. And as Africa continues to face economic strains, security crisis, and governance disputes, the question grows louder. Are this coup a cry for change or a cycle of ambition repeating itself across borders? In another part of Africa, we see tragedy striking in the oil-rich region of South Kordofan within Sudan, where a drone operated by the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, the RSF, it hit a kindergarten in the town of Kalogil. The attack reportedly killed 50 people. Amongst them were 33 children. The assault didn't end there. Paramedics who rushed in to help the wounded were reportedly struck in a second drone strike, while nearby civilian sites were also targeted, according to a rights group monitoring the conflict. Humanitarian organizations have condemned the attack as a flagrant violation of international humanitarian law, especially given that children and medical responders were deliberately targeted. This tragic loss of innocent life highlights how the ongoing war between the Rapid Support Force and the regular armed forces continue to ravage civilian communities. Now, with communications, blackouts, and restricted humanitarian access in many parts of Sudan, the final death toll may rise and the risk of further such strike persists, raising urgent questions about the protection of civilians in conflict zones. While in India, a tragic incident far removed from geopolitics, a fire at the nightclub Birch by Romeo Lane in Arpora, Goa, a popular tourist state in India, got at the venue late on Saturday, 6 December 2025, killing 25 people. Among the victims were at least 4 tourists from the same family who were on what they reported as their first holiday in Goa. According to preliminary investigations, the fire was triggered by electric cracks or indoor pyrotechnics that ignited the club's wooden ceiling. This is moments when the blaze erupted into the club site and had people scampering for their lives. We see in that video that a lot of people were trying to run for their lives, but unfortunately, a large number of staff working in the basement kitchen area became trapped. Most suffocated due to smoke inhalation and lack of proper exits. Authorities have launched a magisterial inquiry, registered affair of culpable homicide against club owners and managers, and issued arrest warrants. Local politicians and opposition parties have already accused the state government of gross negligence, arguing that safety regulations and licensing norms appear to have been ignored, possibly due to corruption or rent-seeking by club operators and authorities. The tragedy has rattled not only Goa's tourism-dependent economy, but also the sense of security for tourists and workers alike. For many, it serves as a grim reminder that unchecked commercial expansion, especially nightlife and tourism, can come at a deadly human cost if safety standards are disregarded. And to another highlight for this afternoon, the United States President Donald Trump on Sunday reacted to Netflix's attempt to acquire the historic Hollywood studio Warner Bros., warning that the streaming giant already holds a very large market share and that it could be a problem. Speaking on his arrival at the Kennedy Center Honors award ceremony, President Donald Trump said he will be involved in that decision, referring to the regulatory process now on the way as federal authorities examine the nearly $83 billion acquisition, which has already sparked serious antitrust concerns in Washington.
And when they have Warner Brothers, that share goes up a lot. So I don't know. That's going to be for some economists to tell. And I'll be involved in that decision too.
Did
They have a very big market share.
Did he make any guarantees to you about the merger if they do merge?
No, not at all. He came up. He was in the Oval Office last week. I have a lot of respect for him. He's a great person, but he's done one of the greatest jobs in the history of movies and other things. He's got a lot of interesting things happening aside from what you're talking about. But it is a big market share. There's no question about it.
Well, despite the caution, President Donald Trump praised Netflix co-CEO Ted Sarandos, who recently visited the White House. Trump described him as someone who has done one of the greatest jobs in the history of movies.
Well, that's got to go through a process, and we'll see what happens. Netflix is a great company, and they've done a phenomenal job. Ted is a fantastic man. I have a lot of respect for him, but it's a lot of market share. So we'll have to see what happens.
Well, this mix of admiration and regulatory concerns has raised questions about Trump's priorities, especially considering the scale of influence this merger would give Netflix. If approved, Netflix would take over HBO Max and Warner Bros., the studio behind film classics such as Casablanca and Citizen Kane and modern blockbusters like Barbie. Critics argue this would heavily consolidate Hollywood power into one streaming giant, potentially weakening competition, raising subscription prices, and reducing creative diversity. But there are also public concerns and controversial past of Netflix. The deal is unfolding at a time when Netflix is still trying to recover from its earlier backlash. Over previous years and even in recent months, the company faced waves of criticism for content decisions that many families found troubling, including Netflix Controversy, which has faced major backlash over the release of a film such as Cuties, a film about preteen girls on a dance team. Critics are accused and argued that the film, or rather its marketing, of sexualizing minors. The original promotional artwork and trailer triggered widespread outrage. Because of that backlash, many viewers publicly pledged to cancel their Netflix subscription. The hashtag cancel Netflix trended, and reports from analytics firms suggested a spike in cancellation following the controversy. Netflix did respond. The company apologized for the provocative poster, removed it, and defended the film as social commentary rather than exploitation. More recently, around October this year, Netflix has been criticized again by some parents, cultural conservative groups, and high-profile individuals for including LGBTQ+ or transgender character themes in programming aimed for children. For example, a children's show on Netflix was singled out by critics for having a trans lead character, which helped drive renewed cancel Netflix calls. These controversies left many questioning whether Netflix should be entrusted with even more cultural and market power, especially over a studio as historic as Warner Bros. Is this good news or is this bad news? For the economic part, that depends on who is watching. For media analysts and regulators, the deal raises alarms. A single company controlling such a massive chunk of Hollywood could limit competition, reduce storytelling diversity, and give Netflix outsized influence over global entertainment. For Trump, the situation seems more complicated. He has expressed both admiration for Netflix leadership and concern about monopoly power. His statements suggest he wants to appear pro-innovation and pro-business, while also positioning himself as the regulator who will step in if corporate power becomes excessive. For subscribers and families, the question is whether Netflix's past controversies translate into even bigger cultural influence if the merger succeeds. Many are wondering if content for children will become more ideological, if prices will rise, or if smaller creators will be squeezed out. For Hollywood creators, the fear is that another major merger could tighten creative control and reduce opportunities outside the Netflix ecosystem. This case could also set a precedent for how President Trump's administration handles major mergers in media, tech, and in entertainment. It raises deeper questions about whether cultural influence should be concentrated in one global platform, especially one recovering from public trust issues. The proposed Netflix Warner Bros. Acquisition is more than a corporate transaction. It is a test of how much power one streaming giant should have over global storytelling. Trump's comments reflect the tension between encouraging business growth and preventing monopolies. Meanwhile, critics worry that Netflix's past controversies, especially around children's content, could become magnified if it gains control of one of Hollywood's oldest studios. Whether this turns out to be good news or bad news depends on where one stands from. But what is certain is that the decision will reshape the future of movies, reshape the future of streaming and cultural influence, not just in America, but of course globally. From geopolitical conflict in Southeast Asia, as we've seen today, to the attempted coups in Africa, from wars that test the durability of peace agreements to mega mergers with Netflix and Warner Bros. That redefine cultural influence, one theme in today's news keeps resurfacing. Power is shifting, politically, militarily, and culturally. And the consequences are falling squarely on ordinary people. In Benin, citizens watched a fragile democracy come under threat from its own soldiers. And in Thailand and Cambodia, families near the border brace for renewed instability despite promises of peace. In the United States, questions arise about who controls global storytelling and what values shape the content consumed by billions. And across all of these stories, the tension between authority and accountability is becoming sharper. And as nations and corporations compete for influence, the world's most vulnerable populations, civilians, children, and everyday consumers remain the ones who feel the first and deepest impact when power shifts. As always, we'll continue tracking these developments and bringing clarity to a rapidly changing world. But for now, it's bye. Thank you for joining today's Flash News. Until next time, do have a pleasant day.